You're clever, Gordon. One day it's going to get you killed. And you, West, not every situation calls for your patented approach of shoot first, shoot later, shoot some more, and then when everybody's dead, try to ask a question or two.
Hello there, we are the Movie Meisters, and we just saw the movie Wild Wild West. Matt, why did we watch the Wild Wild West?
So there's this fellow called Kevin Smith that people may be aware of.
Oh, yes.
And he directed Clerks and some other things. And for a while, I don't know if he still does it, he had this thing where he got on a stage and he just told stories about himself. One of his stories is about like why Kevin Smith is a good writer and Hollywood producers are all idiots. And he does this Superman script. And the punchline is the stupid Hollywood guy. He wanted a dumb giant spider in the Superman movie. He wanted to ruin Kevin Smith's amazing fanboyish Superman movie with his stupid giant spider. And then later on, that same producer produces Wild West, and there's a giant fucking spider in it. Haha, very funny. Anyway, come to find out, Kevin Smith liked Man of Steel.
That's right. I knew you were going to bring that up.
I want to understand.
Sure.
How it's possible that this movie, the Wild Wild West, is so reviled and the butt of every joke and the example of a shitty, commercial, horrific garbage movie. I mean, when I think of Man of Steel, I picture a man in a pile of skulls screaming forever.
Yeah.
It's the worst. It's the worst. My question for you, Kenneth, now that we've both watched Wild Wild West, a movie which I admit I would never have watched again if this hadn't come up.
Yeah.
But does Wild Wild West have any redeeming qualities?
I would say yes. I mean, like, I can tell that the actors are really committing to what they're doing. I mean, especially Kenneth Branagh. He's like the best part of this movie. Like,
I agree. I think it's probably worth watching in snippets just to get the sequences where Will Smith and Kenneth Branagh are trading insults with each other.
Yes.
I haven't seen him in a coon's age.
Well, I can see where it'd be difficult for a man of your stature to keep in touch with even half the people you know.
Well, perhaps the lovely Miss East will keep you from being a slave to your disappointment.
Well, you know, beautiful women, they encourage you one minute and cut the legs out from under you the next.
As you pointed out while we were watching it, it seems like Kenneth Branagh is the only one like actually like having fun. He knows what he's in, and he's just hamming it up to the nth degree and just enjoying himself. He's reveling in this.
Yeah, I thought some people even took it more seriously than it really deserved. Like the guy, the Buffalo Bill / police chief from Monk is in it, and he plays a dumb, evil general guy, and he gives it like a little bit of sadness and regret and like the horror of war and stuff. It's like not necessary at all.
No, it completely doesn't fit this movie. And I would say that's the movie's biggest fault, is that it can't tell if it's comedy or if it's a parody. There are parts where it's just like, oh, it's a witty buddy cop comedy. One character is this brilliant inventor, and the other one's just an old-fashioned cowboy. They're both working for the president, and they need to stop an evil megalomaniacal villain. On the other hand, there are parts where it's just like too ridiculous to the point where it's just like, is this a Mel Brooks movie, or is it trying to be a Mel Brooks movie? And I would say that's the movie's biggest fault. I would say part of this movie is trying to take itself seriously, where Will Smith is talking about how his family was slaughtered way back when, and he's trying to find the guy who did it, and it turns out to be Kenneth Branagh. Those things are kind of intending to ground the movie, but they just sort of distract from the more humorous parts. I mean, you have him talking about how his family was slaughtered in that very same movie. You have him dressing up in drag and fooling Kenneth Branagh.
Right. It's like trying to be Bugs Bunny.
Yes,
during that sequence,
exactly.
But the live action, it just does not work.
Yeah, it's a general thing where you can't do cartoon comedy in a live action format. In a cartoon, you can have super silly things and you will buy it. You will buy Bugs Bunny dressing up as a woman and convincing somebody that he's an attractive woman or something. Whereas with this, it's like, You have Kevin Kline dressing up as a woman early on, and then you have Will Smith in his big character arc of appreciating what Kevin Kline does by him dressing up in drag, even though he said the whole movie, I'm not going to dress up in drag. So
he learned something.
He learned something.
It's like Mulan.
Yeah. It's exactly like Mulan. Yeah.
Designed it to go with this. Jim West does not wear costumes.
A couple of things to note here. This movie was directed by Barry Sonnenfeld, who did all 3 Men in Black movies. And I should point out, I really liked the first one. I mean, it might be some nostalgia talking, but I enjoyed that movie. That one was a buddy comedy, and it worked more than this movie because you have one character being played completely straight and one character kind of wacky, fish out of water sort of deal. I mean, Tommy Lee Jones is played completely serious in Men in Black. And
Right.
Whereas this movie, you have Artemis Gordon played by Kevin Kline, and you have Will Smith's character, James West. And they're both like the wacky buddies, and Will Smith stepping over the wire, and then it causes that trap to attack them. You know, with Men in Black, you've got a good dynamic between Tommy Lee Jones and Will Smith, whereas with this, you got the 2 wacky characters, and it's not fitting. So it seems like more of a parody. So I guess this movie is more comparable to Men in Black 2, which was more self-aware in its comedy, and if you get too self-aware, it goes into parody, and this movie just went back and forth, and I think that's the movie's main fault. But back to your point, comparing this to Man of Steel.
I feel like even though this movie is bad and
Yeah.
it's tonally inconsistent and Selma Hayek is not good at acting,
Right.
there's like a modicum of like joy and whimsy that exists in it. They built wacky steampunk props, and there's like elaborate Wild West sets that people are punching each other through, you know, transparent sugar made to resemble glass. You know, it's it's a movie.
Yeah, that's the big point of comparison, is that even though it is a remake of an old TV show, it's not quite as cynical or cynically made as something you would see today, like a Man of Steel, where it's like, well, edgy and dark is the latest thing. Whether it fits the character or not, we're going to make this edgy and dark. Whereas with Wild Wild West, Matt, I don't know if you've seen any episodes of the old TV show. I happened to catch one recently. Here's kind of a story that I think is sort of preposterous, where the guy who played James West in the old TV show, he was really angry at this movie. He hated it. He was so angry that Will Smith actually went up to him and apologized to him. Having seen the TV show, one episode, in fact, it had the same villain, Dr. Loveless. Instead of being a guy who's been sawed in half, he's just played by a little person. That show is super duper corny, super over the top. And tonally, this movie perfectly captures exactly what that show is. So
Interesting. So
yeah.
he was offended, but not because this is the Western version of the Twilight Zone or whatever, and they made it
Right.
wacky and goofy, but it was always that goofy.
Yeah, at least as far as I'm concerned. I don't know if it's because the actor took it seriously back then, or if he just flat out didn't like the movie because it was bad.
I don't know. What else is there to say about this movie?
There really isn't too much.
There's
no.
a really weird reference to RCA Record Company at one point. It's not a joke.
Yeah.
I don't know what... Like, a man with a giant ear horn sticking out of his head dies, and a little dog jumps out of someone's lap and stares into the horn, which is like a logo for a record company of a little dog looking into a phonograph. And that's not a joke.
No, yeah, that's something where, older people who were probably alive during the time.
Yeah, maybe they had like commercials for RCA Records in the Wild Wild West.
Could be, yeah. I don't know, but somebody would go, I recognize that. I mean, you recognize it.
So bizarre.
Yeah, but it's pretty random. Yeah.
Yeah, I laughed every once in a while.
Oh,
a lot of
me
it
too.
fell flat, and there were some editing mistakes almost that ruined the joke. There's this one part where the guy's doing Freudian slips, and to close it out, Will Smith says, "Let's get some shut ass," and then they both kind of go to sleep. And I took that as he told a joke, the other guy got it, and they don't have to say anything; they just go to sleep. But then they cut like back and forth between them, and Will Smith like peeks out from under his hat and watches the other guy go to sleep, and then suddenly open his eyes really wide. Like it took him like 10 seconds to realize that Will Smith had said "shut ass."
Yeah,
I guess
it ruins the joke. Yeah. Yeah, I would say weird editing in general. There was one part where the bad guys are hunting down our main characters, and Salma Hayek is with them, and she knows that one billiard ball is sleeping gas, and then she accidentally throws it at Will Smith, and then all of a sudden it cuts to Will Smith and Kevin Kline waking up. We get what happened, but it was just like this weird fade where maybe it was cut for time. I don't know. It was a little strange.
Jim.
This movie is not tinted blue throughout.
Right?
And there's not a big emotional scene where President Grant tells Will Smith that maybe he should kill a whole bunch of children to keep his Wild West powers secret.
In the end, isn't that all we want from a movie?
Yeah, I guess to me it is a little bit cynical. It's at least lighthearted. I can't hate it. I can't hate it. I can hate Man of Steel.
Yeah.
Man of Steel is it's like an iceberg. It's blue, it's giant, and it's just slowly covering the earth. It's coming toward us imperceptibly. All movies will become Man of Steel. They'll be dark and growly voices. I will see superheroes murder children at some point, I'm sure.
I think a good comparison would be like, we reviewed all the Bond movies. I think this is like comparing Moonraker to Die Another Day.
Yeah, this is like a really bad Bond movie, actually.
Oh, there you go.
There was a Wild West Bond movie, and it was pretty bad. It would definitely be a Roger Moore one, just because of how wacky it is. And
Yeah.
Jaws is in it.
Yes, of course. Jaws is... He even kicks him in the nuts, just like Bond kicks Jaws. And then there was a clanging sound.
That's right. Oh, yeah, and then he dies somehow.
Oh, that was so weird. I have never... Like, I saw this movie when I was much younger, and I was so confused. Like, what killed that guy?
Yeah, he walks between some pipes,
Yeah.
and then he, short circuits.
Yeah, I mean, I was assuming that it was the pipes or something that caused it, but there's no real
Yeah, I think
indication
it
of that.
was intended to be some clever trap that he
Right.
lured him into, but I guess that shot didn't work, and so they just cut it out. But they spend 3 minutes fighting, so
Yeah.
they didn't want to cut out him fighting the guy.
Right. Yeah, definitely some pacing issues too. I mean, we were talking about the part where Will Smith dresses in drag, and at a certain point, we're just like, the scene is still going. But yeah, beyond that, I can't hate this movie either. I mean, it's silly and it's cynical to the degree of it's a remake of an old TV show, but at the same time, I think it was fairly faithful. Just basing this on the one episode I saw, it's like the Mission Impossible movie. You know, that was because in the 90s they were remaking old 60s, 70s TV shows into movies. You know, you have The Fugitive and Mission Impossible, and maybe a few others that I'm missing.
Yeah, but you compare this to Mission Impossible,
Well, I mean,
which I saw both of those movies as a small child, and
yeah,
it is kind of ridiculous how good Mission Impossible is.
no, that's true. I'm not speaking to the quality of each movie, because Mission Impossible is great. It's more the fact that in my mind each film was faithful to the intentions of the original show, or at least tonally or stylistically anyway. Which is also kind of an ironic thing to me, because people who were in the original Mission Impossible show didn't like the Mission Impossible movie, so it's interesting. Yeah, these days we're more of in the pattern of remaking 80s things. I don't know what will be next.
Remaking the very 90s things. Well, they're still making Mission Impossible movies.
That's right. Anywho, I think we've exhausted everything we can talk about for Wild Wild West. We are the Movie Meisters. My name is Kenneth.
I'm Matt.
We are the Movie Meisters saying,
The cinema is not a slice of life, but a piece of cake.
thanks for watching.
I'm Dr. Arliss Lovelace, formerly of the Confederate Army.
Yes, Dr. Lovelace. Fine-looking spider you have there.